American poet Daryl Hall once sang, "Keep on missing each other. Our world's out of order. All I see is missed opportunity." In one of the most intense and technically brilliant rivalries in professional wrestling history, we saw a feud spanning multiple promotions, featuring some of the most acclaimed matches of the 2000s, and showcasing two of the most skilled wrestlers to ever step foot into the square circle. Your sweet tooth is hopefully going to be satiated as we explore the epic saga of the Olympic hero versus the Samoan Submission Machine. We're talking Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe. So grab some water and maybe have some milk handy as we roll this one back with a rewind. Welcome to the Feud Rewind. I'm your host, Benza Lance. Before we dive into the rivalry between Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle, let's set the stage by introducing our two main players. Kurt Angle, the Olympic gold medalist who transitioned into professional wrestling in 1998, quickly becoming one of WWE's top stars. Known for his incredible amateur wrestling background, unparalleled technical skills, and surprising comedic timing, Angle was a dominant force in WWE from 1999 to 2006. The backbone of Kurt Angle's persona is deeply rooted in his amateur wrestling background and Olympic success. The drive for perfection stems from his Olympic training. He's not satisfied with being just good. He needs to be the best. Winning isn't just important to Angle. It's everything. This makes every loss feel like a personal failure. And while Angle's quick transition from amateur to professional wrestling showcases his ability to learn and excel in new environments, specifically during his Perk Angle years, he displayed a confidence bordering on arrogance. His Olympic hero persona wasn't just a character. It's a reflection of his genuine belief in his superiority. Of course, Angle reveres the history of wrestling, both amateur and professional, which influences his approach to matches and rivalries. Samoa Joe, on the other hand, built his reputation on the independent circuit and in Ring of Honor before becoming a cornerstone of TNA. Joe's unique blend of power, agility, and submission expertise made him one of the most feared competitors in the business. Psychologically, Samoa Joe's profile presents a stark contrast to Angle's, shaped by his journey through independent promotions. Joe's demeanor exudes a constant sense of barely contained aggression and unyielding intensity. Joe, to me, exuded the air of the mafia boss heavy. Quiet in the corner until it's time to work, and definitely not a man you'd want to go out of your way to cross. Partly, this was due to having a strong territorial instinct. Having built his reputation in smaller promotions, Joe fiercely defended his status against newcomers like Angle. Despite this, however, Joe regularly embodied an underdog mentality. Despite his dominance, Joe often sees himself as fighting against the establishment, fueling his drive. Above all else, unlike Angle's overt bravado, Joe's confidence is more subtle, but no less powerful. Their paths would eventually cross in TNA, leading to a rivalry that would define both men's careers and leave an indelible mark on professional wrestling. The stage was set in 2006, when Kurt Angle shocked the wrestling world by leaving WWE and signing with TNA. Angle's arrival in TNA immediately raised the profile of the company, and fans were salivating at the prospect of dream matches between Angle and against TNA's homegrown talent. At the top of that list was a showdown with Samoa Joe, who had been dominating TNA since his debut there in 2005 at Slammiversary. Joe had gone on an unprecedented 18-month undefeated streak, capturing both the X Division and Tag Team titles along the way to become a dominant dual champion. He was the immovable object of TNA, and Angle was about to become the irresistible force. In 2006, Angle made his TNA debut on October 19th, confronting Samoa Joe after Joe refused to relinquish the NWA World Heavyweight Championship belt that he had stolen from Jeff Jarrett. The two men ended up fighting while Jarrett retrieved the title belt. Angle was then the special enforcer for the title versus career match between Jarrett and Sting at Bound for Glory. However, Angle took out referee Rudy Charles and assumed the referee's role for the rest of the matchup. However, the tension between Joe and Angle was palpable, with plenty of tear-apart brawls happening backstage and around the ring. The anticipation for the first match was off the charts. Angle and Joe would cross paths in tag team matches and multi-man encounters, but their first singles match was saved for a special occasion. That occasion came at TNA's Genesis pay-per-view in November 2006. The match was everything fans had hoped for and more. For over 18 minutes, Angle and Joe engaged in a technical wrestling clinic, mixing mat wrestling, power moves, and high-impact strikes. The crowd was electric throughout, hanging on every near fall and submission attempt. Joe immediately asserted his dominance, backing Angle into the corner with a flurry of strikes that echoed throughout the arena. But Angle, showcasing his amateur wrestling prowess, managed to duck under and secure a waistlock. This back and forth set the tone for their entire rivalry. Joe's power and striking ability versus Angle's technical wrestling skills. The match reached its climax with a finishing sequence that's still talked about today. Angle finally locked in his patented ankle lock. Joe, in visible agony, clawed his way to the ropes, but Angle, relentless as ever, dragged him back to the center of the ring. Joe tried to pull through, but Angle held on, grapevining the leg. After a tense moment that had the entire arena holding its breath, Joe taps out. The streak was over, and a legendary rivalry was born. In the end, it was Angle who would emerge victorious, using his patented ankle lock to force Joe to submit. This marked the first time Joe had been pinned or submitted in singles competition in TNA, ending his undefeated streak at 18 months. The match was instantly hailed as a classic. While some would question ending Joe's streak in this way, as Angle definitely didn't need the shine from the win, it was obvious that these two titans had insane chemistry. More importantly, it set the stage for the remainder of their rivalry. The fallout from their first encounter only intensified their rivalry. Joe, incensed at having his undefeated streak broken, became obsessed with proving he was better than Angle. The Olympic gold medalist, for his part, was determined to show that his victory was no fluke. Their second singles match came just a month later at Turning Point 2006. This time, the stakes were even higher as they competed in a 30-minute Iron Man match for the #1 contendership to the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. If their first match was a sprint, this one was going to be a marathon. In the first 10 minutes, Angle dominated, scoring the first fall with a European uppercut followed by the Angle slam. But Joe, showcasing the resilience that made him such a formidable opponent, evened the score at the 15-minute mark with a brutal muscle buster. As the clock ticked down to the final seconds, the score was tied 3-3. Joe had Angle in the coquina clutch, the same move that had earned him the victory so many times before. For half an hour, Angle and Joe pushed each other to their absolute limits. The lead changed hands multiple times, with each man securing falls via pinfall and submission. As the clock ticked down, the intensity had reached a fever pitch. In a finish that would be talked about for years, the match ended in a 3-3 draw as time limit expired. However, TNA management decided the match must have a winner and ordered a sudden death overtime. In a controversial moment, Angle quickly caught Joe in the ankle lock, forcing another submission and taking the victory. For half an hour, Angle and Joe pushed each other to their absolute limits. This finish only added fuel to the fire of their rivalry. Joe felt cheated, arguing that he had fought Angle to a standstill for 30 minutes and only lost due to a questionable overtime period. Angle, ever the competitor, insisted that a win was a win and they had once again proven his superiority. The rivalry between Angle and Joe had now become the hottest thing in TNA, and the company wisely positioned it as the centerpiece for their programming. Over the next few months, Angle and Joe would continue to cross paths, including a memorable segment where Joe interrupted Angle's Hall of Fame induction ceremony, leading to a wild brawl. The next chapter in the rivalry came at TNA's biggest event of the year, Lockdown 2007. This time, Joe and Angle would face off inside the unforgiving steel cage, with the TNA World Heavyweight Championship on the line. Early in this match, we saw how the cage would play a role when Angle tried to escape, only for Joe to catch his leg and pull him down face first onto the steel. Midway through, Joe delivered a stomach-churning muscle buster, driving Angle into the unforgiving steel floor of the cage. Somehow, Angle kicked out, showing the heart of a champion. The match's defining moment came when Angle had Joe in the ankle lock, mirroring their first encounter. It looked like history might repeat itself, but Joe managed to roll through. In one smooth motion, he transitioned behind Angle and locked in the coquina clutch. Angle fought desperately, even trying to climb the cage to break the hold. But eventually, he faded, and Joe captured the TNA World Heavyweight Championship in an instant classic. This victory was a turning point in their rivalry. Joe had finally vanquished his nemesis on the biggest stage possible, capturing the top prize in the company in the process. But as we know, the war between these two was far from over. Hey, this is Benza with the Feud Rewind. I'm here with a word from our first unofficial sponsor. Water. Water. That's what we're talking about. You're made of it, I'm made of it, we're all made of it. And you need some. You don't drink enough. If I'm talking to you, drink some water. It comes in a bunch of different varieties, guys. Hot, cold, frozen. Get out of your tap if you want to, out of a bottle, out of a glass, out of a jar, out of a box. The possibilities are endless. Regardless, you really need to go drink some water. You know what? I'll go grab a glass too. We'll be back here and continue this episode. Thank you so much. Water. This match was heralded as yet another instant classic, once again receiving a 5-star rating. It also marked a significant turning point in their rivalry. Joe had finally vanquished his nemesis on the biggest stage possible, capturing the top prize in the company in the process. However, the war between these two was far from over. Over the next few years, Angle and Joe would continue to cross paths in TNA, trading victories and pushing each other to new heights. Their matches became the standard by which all other TNA bouts were judged, and the rivalry helped elevate the entire company. One particularly memorable encounter came at Lockdown 2008, where Angle and Joe faced off in a submission match. This stipulation played to both men's strengths, as they were renowned for their submission expertise. The match was a technical masterpiece, of course, with both men applying and escaping from a variety of painful holds. This match, for my money, was perhaps the purest distillation of what made their rivalry so special. It was a technical masterpiece that showcased both men's grappling skills and strategic minds. Early on, Angle targeted Joe's arm, perhaps setting up for the ankle lock later. He used a variety of holds, arm wrenches, a Fujiwara armbar, even a cross-arm breaker. But Joe gave as good as he got, focusing on Angle's legs with dragon screws and a nasty knee bar. The finish came when Angle, in a moment of desperation, went for a high-risk move off the top rope. But Joe, ever the opportunist, caught him in mid-air, transitioning smoothly into the coquina clutch. Angle struggled mightily, even managing to get to his feet, but Joe just kept squeezing tighter. Finally, Angle had no choice but to submit, giving Joe another high-profile victory in their rivalry. In the end, it was Joe who once again emerged victorious, forcing Angle to submit to the coquina clutch. This victory further cemented Joe's status as one of TNA's top stars and proved that he truly had Angle's number in their most high-profile encounters. As their rivalry in TNA began to cool, both men's career took interesting turns. Angle remained a cornerstone of TNA until 2016, when he made a shocking return to WWE. Joe, meanwhile, left TNA in 2015 and sided with WWE's NXT brand, quickly becoming one of the top stars of that promotion. In a twist of fate, Angle and Joe would cross paths once again in WWE. Their first WWE encounter came in 2017 at the Great Balls of Fire pay-per-view. Really? Great Balls of Fire. Couldn't come up with a better name. Angle, now the general manager of Raw, was forced to ban Joe from the arena due to Joe's attacks on Brock Lesnar. In a callback to their TNA days, Joe ambushed Angle backstage, applying the coquina clutch and leaving the Olympic hero unconscious. This led to a match between the two at a WWE live event in Toronto, their first one-on-one encounter in nearly a decade. Although not televised, fan footage of the match showed that Angle and Joe still had their incredible chemistry, putting on a show that had the crowd on their feet. Their first televised singles match came on an episode of Raw in 2019. Although shorter than their classic TNA encounters, it was a nostalgia-filled affair that reminded fans of the incredible battles these two had waged over the years. Fittingly, the match ended in a no contest after interference from Baron Corbin, leaving their WWE series unresolved. Now this brings us to the end of the canonical rewind for the week. Now that we've covered the timeline of their rivalry, let's take a moment to analyze what made the Angle and Joe feud so special and its impact on professional wrestling. First and foremost, it was the in-ring quality of their matches. Angle and Joe had a chemistry that is rarely seen in professional wrestling. Their styles complemented each other perfectly, with Angle's amateur wrestling background meshing seamlessly with Joe's striking and submission expertise. Their matches were always hard-hitting affairs that blurred the line between scripted entertainment and legitimate athletic contests. The intensity and realism they brought to their encounters raised the bar for what fans expected from professional wrestling matches. Moreover, their rivalry helped elevate TNA to new heights. While the company had always positioned itself as an alternative to WWE, the Angle vs. Joe feud gave them something truly special that couldn't be seen anywhere else. Their matches became must-see events that drew eyes to the product and helped TNA achieve some of its highest ratings and pay-per-view buy rates. The Angle vs. Joe rivalry also had a significant impact on both men's careers. For Angle, it helped cement his legacy beyond the WWE, proving that he could have classic matches and compelling storylines in any promotion. It showed that his success wasn't just a product of the WWE's machine, but rather a result of his own incredible talent. For Joe, this feud with Angle was his coming out party on a national stage. While he had always been a star of the independent scene, his matches with Angle proved that he could hang with the very best in the world. The credibility he gained from these encounters helped propel him to the main event scene and established him as one of the top stars of his generation. Their rivalry also influenced a generation of wrestlers who followed. The technical proficiency, intensity, and realism of their matches became a template that many young wrestlers sought to emulate. You can see echoes of Angle and Joe in many of today's top rivalries, particularly those that emphasize in-ring storytelling and physical intensity. It's also worth reflecting on this feud's place in wrestling history. While there had been feuds that lasted longer, had more fan-favorable results, or drew more money, few can match the consistent in-ring quality and intensity of Angle vs. Joe. Their matches stand the test of time, remaining just as thrilling and compelling today as they were when they first took place. The fact that they were able to rekindle their rivalry in WWE years later, albeit briefly, speaks to the timeless nature of their conflict. In many ways, Joe vs. Angle represents the best of what professional wrestling can be. It was a rivalry built on mutual respect and a shared drive for excellence. Every time they stepped into the ring together, fans knew they were in for something special. When these two psychological profiles collided, it created a perfect storm of competition and conflict. Angle and Joe gave us legitimacy in battle. Both men prided themselves on their realness in a scripted sport, leading to intense shoot-style matches. Partly influenced by such, this created a reciprocal war of sorts, with Angle's traditional respect for wrestling clashing with Joe's desire to dominate and destroy. Remember, both wrestling fans and wrestling talent have always been tribalistic to a certain degree, and Angle, being new to TNA, represented WWE's mainstream wrestling success. Joe, the homegrown talent, fought to prove the worth of his unconventional path. Of course, both men's confidence in their abilities led to a constant one-upsmanship in their matches, constantly trying to prove technical superiority. Their closely matched skills and trading of victories meant neither could ever feel truly superior, driving their feud forward. It ultimately left an air of unfinished business upon the feud's completion. Their clash of personalities and mindsets elevated their rivalry beyond mere physical competition. It became a battle of ideologies, of differing views of what it meant to be the best in professional wrestling. This psychological depth is a key reason why their feud resonated so strongly with fans and left such a lasting impact on the industry. Alright, In a world full of negativity and hot takes, I certainly don't need to add my own thoughts to that dumpster fire. However, while the Angle and Joe rivalry was undoubtedly iconic, there were some potentially missed opportunities that could have elevated it even further. Not taking into account the possibilities that could have been explored with Samoa Joe's unbeaten streak, the main program between these two for the world title was almost comically short. The world title matches in TNA were stellar, but a longer, more sustained program with the title as the focal point could have added more gravitas to their rivalry and TNA's main event scene. Going hand in hand with that point, their feud in TNA kind of fizzled out rather than having a definitive final match to end the rivalry. A heavily promoted final chapter of sorts could have provided better closure and once again elevated everybody involved and the company as a whole. Speaking of, one of the departments that the WWE has excelled at recently is their documentary/historical division. TNA missed a gigantic opportunity to produce a comprehensive documentary about this rivalry, which could have been a valuable piece of wrestling history. Seriously, what's up with that? While these missed opportunities are intriguing to consider, it's important to note that the Angle vs. Joe rivalry was still exceptional as it played out. These what-ifs simply underscore how much potential their feud had and how it captured fans' imaginations. And with that, this brings us to the end of the Rewind for the week. I appreciate you spending some time with me to relive some classic wrestling drama. Gonna stop doing that with my hands. You know to do that follow, like, subscribe, and share gimmick. Lastly, we're on all the socials as Feud Rewind. Fellow fan, I'm your host, Ben Lance, and I'll see you next week when we roll it back with another feud to rewind.